Hello and welcome to Art and Self. I'm Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator, the Curated Connections Library, and the Art and Self Connection Circle. This is a podcast where we experience the range and depth of what it means to be human, seen through our connections and conversations about works of art. These art conversations are here to show you that art is here for you as a catalyst, a challenger, a coach, and a comfort. Before we get started, take a moment to fill up your lungs with a deep breath. Connect with your body and your mind and your spirit, and get ready to discover what art has to show you. Welcome, Heather Doyle Fraser, to the Art and Self podcast.
I am so excited to be here.
Me too. So before we get started, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Absolutely. I am Heather Doyle Fraser, as you just said, and I am a publisher, author, and coach with my company, the Compassionate Mind Collaborative. And I like to think that I help people not only on the path to publish and navigating that writing process, but also bring compassion to the world one book at a time, which is one of the things I love that I do.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So for everyone listening, Heather is my book coach and will be my publisher when my book comes out. And the experience has been just absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. Likewise.
My book will be 7 million times better because of your influence. So you're brilliant at what you do. So we'll talk at the end how to get in touch with you and what you have coming up. But as we talk about the art, I'm sure we'll talk about the writing process. And I've chosen art that I think fits our work and your work. So I will pull those up and then I'm going to tell you the titles and the artists. Don't get too hung up on titles because I really like to focus on the artwork.
And I can understand not getting hung up on titles because,
Yeah, indeed. Especially writers. They're like, oh, words.
I know. Yeah.
All right. So we have, so this one doesn't have a title actually, but this is by the artist Swoon. It might have a title. I just couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Creative Idleness by Michael Cheval, which I thought was really fun. It's just funny. Every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, this one's funny. Mary Magdalene by Shazia Sikander. And Conscious Communion by Brooke Shaden. And I want to thank Susanna Christian on the Art and Self Facebook page for suggesting this artist for me because I went on a rabbit hole of her work and it was beautiful. So. Any of them calling to you?
Wow. Well, that's hard because I feel like they're all sort of calling to me. Shoot. Darn it. You had to pick such great ones. Okay. I think I'm either choosing number 1 or number 3. I think I'm going to choose number 1.
Awesome. Okay. Well,
that was a hard choice. That was a really hard choice.
You'll get to spend some time with number 3 because that one's is going to be in the book.
Great.
Just hasn't been written yet.
I'm excited about that.
Well, it's currently going to be in the book. Who knows if it actually will end up? You know how that goes. I'll keep switching things out. All right. Let me make this a little bit bigger for us.
Yeah. If we could make it bigger, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So what drew you to this one? Oh, she chose the one by Swoon. If y'all didn't know what number 1 meant, we'll put a link in the show notes. You can also see a version. You can see a video version on YouTube and on Facebook that will have the image on the screen.
Yeah. I really was drawn to her concentration and her strength and the focus and the brilliance that she was like emanating, but also cultivating. So this one was like just really when I first saw it, I was like, am I choosing this just because it's the first one that I saw? But that Mary Magdalene one that I was also kind of toying with choosing, I was drawn to similar things with that one too.
Yeah.
So
they're similar. For sure. Okay. So before we get started in really picking this apart, let us describe it for our listeners who are not watching the video. Can you start? And then I'll fill in any details that you miss.
Well, so the central image for me is the woman who is in not really black and white, but sort of black and white, wearing, black drawing and wearing a black shirt, black hair. You can see all of the like sinews even in her arms and everything with the drawing. And she's looking down on all this magnificence that I see, which is not black and white or black, drawn in black, gold, white. There's a lot of intricate details in there. There's a skeleton and there's looks like some birds, some different, all kinds of different shapes. And then that part is white, but with gold kind of outlines. And then it moves out to just the gold outlines but it's overlaid on top of this brilliant shining out like radiance with yellows and golds. And she's overlaid on top of that too. And that moves out towards the edges into like this divine purple color. So we've got gold and purple at the edges. And it's not a complete, it's not completely rectangle. There's some edges that are a little bit not square.
Yeah, it looks like that maybe watercolor paper or something.
Yeah, watercolor paper. Yeah, but yeah. So it's not like, that's interesting to me with like how intricate all of these other lines are, and that's kind of like not wavy, but colory edge. And I like the softness in like the moving from the gold to the purpley color. It's blending like there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that was a good description. The woman is we only see her torso and head and arms. And then she's doing something with her hands. It looks like she's creating this thing below her. And it's white. It's like just a solid white shape. It almost looks like lace or even like paper with shapes cut out, just like this beautiful, like intricate thing. But then there's the white, but then there's a whole other layer of like this orangey brown color that is another layer of these sort of silhouettes of all sorts of things blending together. So really beautiful. I'm not at all surprised you picked this one. If I had to guess, I probably would have guessed this one. At one point, I think I had like 8 choices for you. And I was like, I had to narrow them down.
And because I am a musician, that number 2 one was very intriguing to me too, because she had a guitar and, like all of that stuff. So this was it was a really hard choice to pick this one.
Awesome. Okay. So where do you want to start? What is really drawing you to talk about first?
I really resonate with this woman here because I feel like she's creating this multi-layered piece beneath her. And I kind of love that it's just you just see her torso, because to me and all of this stuff is shining out of that, because this is her body of work to me. That's her that's the rest of her body. Is this the work that she's doing? And I love that. I do feel like she's so focused and has you can just see the strength in her arms and her hands and her face. Just that really is speaking to me there. And then in that, then she's creating something so intricately delicate too at the same time, which I love. And I love that there's this two-tone of the creation below, that overlay on top of it, because I feel like in my work with people, it's this collaboration of these two things coming together, and sometimes even more than that. But it's such a layered process. And so that's another thing I really love is the layers in this, not only underneath her and what she's creating, but then how that's emanating out, the layers of all the things that are emanating out from that. And I feel like the way that these rays are shining out in this way, it, for me, speaks to how your voice just can touch so many different places, and it's almost infinite. And so that's what it was. I really was drawn to all those things.
Yeah, I can see all of that in there. So clearly, I loved how you said the rays going out, because that because I am in the midst of writing the book, I talk about it all the time on the podcast, because it's really all I think about.
Right.
But it's this process of it's me in front of a computer, and I'm just I am like, some days it's amazing. Some days I'm just toiling. Some days I'm struggling, and then some days it's like I do a whole thing and I realize, wait, this is wrong. There's a whole deeper layer, but it's all of this like internal work. But in the end, I love that like this, like, I don't know where it's going to go or what it's going to do. But right now it's just sitting with the work and doing the work day after day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely resonate with that for sure.
And to me, like when I look at this, how this yellowy gold is kind of merging with this lilac color, the purpley color. I feel like that's like when I look at that, and I'm thinking about this in terms of books right now.
Yeah.
And your voice kind of coming out in that way. Like that's how like your people, your readers are like merging with you almost when they're reading your voice, like when they're experiencing your voice. Like it's kind of like, oh, that message is coming together and you're able to kind of plant this new seed of understanding that, and that merging is happening. It's always about a relationship to me. And I feel like there's a relationship happening with those two colors. They're kind of blending together. I love it.
Oh yeah, because the white is the thing that she's making. Like that seems the one thing she's touching.
Right.
That's her art. That's her book. And then the brownish one is what happens when you take her work and when you take the reader. And I that's how I view works of art too. That it's. And I've been trying to talk about this. I haven't had a drawing. When I was in grad school, I was trying to visually represent this somehow of like what happens when the artist or the artwork and the person come together. There's something in the middle that happens. Yeah. And then, that's what this is. That's what this is showing, because it's not a like direct me. Cause it also looks like if you were to shine a light through the artwork and it would leave a shadow, but then you look at it, you're like, well, there are some things that are mimicked, but there's other things too, like these fish, there's like other things.
Yeah. And so like you can see the skeleton, like a human type skeleton, right? In the middle there. But then you see a fish skeleton out here.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's like, so I have my experience. I'm writing about this experience. I'm putting it in my voice. And it's transmuted or translated in somebody else's life. It's still like the skeleton, but it's a different skeleton. Like they can see themselves, but it's still different, but it's still the same, but it's different, but it's the same.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I go through moments of panic when I'm writing, and it's really personal to me. And I'm like, oh, this is too much about me. This is too much about me. But I always have to remember every book I've ever read where it was about another person. Yeah. I'm most connected when it is about person. Because I read this other book that was like just one like rah quotable thing after another, and she didn't talk about herself at all. And I didn't even finish. I was like, I can't, I can't do that. I need her. I need to know her.
Yep.
So, I love that. Okay. What other symbols can you find in here?
I can't tell what is happening above the head of that skeleton. I can't really see. But I know that there are things happening there.
Yeah, I keep thinking it's like a headdress or
Well, I see like a headdress, but then like above that, there's something above that. And it looks like there's sort of from what I'm seeing, it looks like she sort of has two owls kind of on her shoulder. On either shoulder, and there's a bird that's sort of covering up, flying in front of one of them, and then there's another bird that's a little bit further up. So I feel like this wisdom happening with these owls, and then the birds kind of, for me, birds often symbolize like not just an owl, but like other birds symbolize hope or something else for me. And so the fact that there's a couple birds in the white one, and then there's a couple on the outside too. I feel like that's translated from her work to this other place with the reader. I love how I feel like there's like a groundedness in this too, like with the lines that are coming down from the skeleton. That feels like a real like connected, grounded place. And then I feel like that is juxtaposed with all of these rays coming out of it too, which is really nice. I think that like when you are grounded, that your message does come out even stronger. I'm so intrigued by like, I feel like there's like foliage in the golden or like that rust, colored lines. I feel like there's some foliage or something happening there. And that's interesting to me because I'm really connected to nature. And that is a very grounding thing for me. But I also notice, so the white seems to be overlaid on almost everything except this. There's this lower left corner where there's a very intricate shape that's on top of the white. And I feel like, when you're writing, you have an intention when you're writing your book. You have this message that you want to share. And then you don't have any control over how, you have this hope for how it's going to land and what it can do, but you don't have any control what happens to it after, when your reader does take that in. But sometimes the reader finds something in your book that you didn't even see. And then that elevates it to this different level that you're like really excited about. They're like, oh my God, I never knew that it could be that for this person. It's not for everybody, but for like some people, they're able to take something and make something even more than you intended out of it. And that's what I think that little left-hand corner on top of the white is to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I have a stupid story that goes with that.
Like it's so intricate.
It really is. Well, it makes me think about what I have a stupid story to tell that's an example of this, but also it makes me think about what we're doing on this podcast. I come week after week and look at a work of art with someone. And I love to imagine that the artists are listening. Most of the work we've chosen has been contemporary art, so the artists could potentially listen. I haven't heard from any of them yet. But, I wonder how often like an interpretation of someone else then fuels their new work and makes them look at their work in a new way. And my stupid story about that is I went to New Orleans in the summer, and I love to talk to street artists and like buy art from people on the street. And I was talking to this man. Oh, what's his name? Hold on one second. It's on the back of this. Here's one of his works of art. His name is Nathan Henry. And he had a painting of a bunch of frogs. It was just like a little frog party. It was so cute. And, we were looking at and talking about these frogs. And then he was like, I just thought I painted a bunch of frogs. And he said, now everybody that comes by calls it a frog orgy.
Calls it a what?
A frog orgy.
Oh.
And so now he's like, my painting is complete. I didn't paint that, but that's clearly what it is now. And so now that's what he calls it. And I think it's so hilarious that your painting then just becomes something completely different depending on what people are noticing. And that's kind of terrifying, though, as a writer to know. I was so scared of being misunderstood, especially at the beginning of this process. All the chapters that I got rid of when I started working with you were all just me trying to explain myself so that nobody could criticize me. Mm-hmm. And those are gone now. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be criticized.
Well, there's a strong chance that everyone is going to be criticized when they write something at some point or another. And that's okay because it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. But I think that when we kind of can liberate that a little bit and know that's going to happen. So I just have to put my best work out there that I can at this moment. And that's what I see her doing. She's just so, and I was just noticing too, so the only other white in this is in her. There are little pieces of white in her, coming down,
so those are the pieces of herself that she's putting into her art.
Yeah. And you can see it from the top of her head all the way down to her fingertips.
Yeah.
Very, very subtly, but yeah.
So that's two ways that, that we have this white sort of being mimicked. And then the artwork is kind of like her body. Like it's showing that she really, it's hard for an artist to separate themselves from their work because it is so much a part of who they are.
Which is why no one wants to be criticized, like in terms of writing, like, because you are putting your, like, everything out there on the page.
Yeah.
And it's so intimidating to do that, and so vulnerable, and also worthwhile.
Yeah. And that's what I have, that fear has come down as I've been working, because I'm like, if anybody's criticizing me, like, they didn't spend 2+ years working on a book, throwing their heart onto the page. And I doubt another person who has done that is out criticizing other people's books, because they know how hard it is to write a book. Yeah. So it reminds me of that Brene Brown quote. I think she talks about it in Daring Greatly, where it's like, I only listen to the people who are out there in the ring doing the work too, because they're willing to, I don't know the exact quote, but
yeah. Not only do they know what it takes, but they also, know, like, they know the work it takes, they know the courage it takes, they know all of those things. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So going back to, that space above the skeleton, because I started to, as you were talking, and then you were talking about something else, so I wanted to come back to it. But to me, it almost looks like a sunset or a sunrise, maybe more a sunrise than a sunset, like the rays coming out. And then, and then there's like, almost like a scarab type of shape, but it's almost like a lotus too. There's like a lotus flower. Yes. So to me, there's all this like spirituality, or like connection to the universe.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And especially because there's like this little space where there's nothing. Like, do you like right
in the
above,
middle, or like I'll point with my mouse?
Like right in the middle, like
right there.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Right there. Yeah. There's like just white space there, which is like, that feels like a center of something, like emanating out from that.
How do you find in the writing process with the clients you've worked at, and in books you've written yourself, that connection with sort of a higher power or spirituality, or whatever we want to call it, come into play?
I think it comes into play in a lot of different ways. I think it comes into play and different ways and at different times during the process. There's always this moment when I'm first working with a client, or when I'm first starting to work on a book for myself. It's the same. I mean, it's a similar time where you're kind of playing around with, what is this book really? Like, what is at the core of this book really? And there's all these, you have these, all these ideas. And then when you hit on that core of the book, you can, when I'm in a conversation with someone, I can feel it all through my body. I know they can too. We talk about that, like, oh, wow, I just got like full body goosebumps, or whatever your physiological response to that is. And like, I can feel like this warming feeling in my chest, like heart center. And I don't know that I've ever come across, when we've had that moment together, like me with a client, that's usually the turning point of like, now we know what this book is. Now this book is really, I thought it was something else. It's not, it's this. And that provides so much clarity. And also, I feel like a sense of comfort. Like, I know I'm on the right path now, because there's this, I not only like intellectually feel it, but I feel it in my heart, soul, center, all of that. So that's and that doesn't always happen at the very beginning. Sometimes that happens a little bit after the beginning, because you think you think what you know, and then all of a sudden you're like, no, that's really this. So that happens. And then for me, in my personal writing practice, I talk about this quite a bit. When I'm actively writing one of my books, I have a process where I get up very early. I like to get up. I'm not normally a morning person, but when I'm in that part of the process, I like to get up early when nobody else is awake. It's just me. I don't do anything else before I start writing. I mean, like, of course, I get a glass of water or coffee or something, but like, I don't get ready for the day. I just come to the page and ask myself, what do I need to hear today? What would like be nourishing to me? Because that's what the message that I want to come out on to my page. And with my book 40 Weeks in particular, the overwhelming response that I have to that book is that people will say to me every time I open that book, no matter to what page, I receive just what I need. And I feel like that's a divine connection between me and the reader and the page and everything, the words, all universe, everything. So, and there's other examples too, but those two I would say stand out the most for me.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I love both of those. I want to talk about each one. So the first one, I completely, when you were describing that moment where you just, that knowing, like I definitely had that with me, that our first, you and I's first call. And that at that moment, that's when I scrapped I already had almost 50,000 words and I cut half of them out, but it was like a really like beautiful release. Cause I was like, oh, well, I know for sure what this book is. And I know for sure that those are not part of that. And so it was like, because I felt something deeper and I get those full body chill moments or those like those moments of like just knowing. And I love them. I just want to chase them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, where do those come from? What is that? Why do we have that? But it's just, the creative spirit.
And from this end, like, even though I know that is that's what happens, it still surprises me. Like when it happens, sometimes I'm like, I really do think this is what the book is about. And I'm so glad that we're both feeling this. But that's it, like let's take a moment and really check in to make sure this is the direction, because you are cutting half your book right now. But
yeah, I remember you were like, this is just a suggestion. You don't have to take it. I'm like, oh no, that's it. You do that. This is it. But yeah, you did. You were like, let's be sure.
Like, let's just sit with it for a second. But when you slow down, that is another piece of that process, like slowing down, really checking in. And then it is very clear. But I think that what you said, one of the things you said before, like, a lot of the time when we first start writing a book, we do spend a good chunk of time trying to like defend our premise. And like, we don't need to defend the premise. This is what it is. And I think that when we can let go of that need to defend the premise, then it just becomes so much richer. The book does. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because that reminds me, because there's a bunch of like business books out there and you pick them up and you realize the first third of the book is them just explaining what they're about to say, why we should listen. And the whole time I'm like, just tell me, get to the point. Like, have confidence in yourself. You don't have to explain all of this. But then there was me doing that exact same thing. But yeah.
Well, and sometimes if it's a brand new idea, like it's helpful to provide some of that, right?
Yeah,
to provide some of that's great, but you don't need to spend half your book on it.
Yeah. Elizabeth Gilbert didn't like spend her first half of her book telling us why it was important for her to travel. I mean, she did say why it was important and why she did it.
Well, like I said, you can say like, this is what you need to know. I love that about her book, Eat, Pray, Love. I love that about that moment when she is like, she gives you context. Like, I was in a marriage that wasn't working. I was kind of in the depths of despair. This is where it was. And then she like just says right there, like, elephant in the room. If you're expecting to hear a story about the divorce and the relationship I had with my husband, guess what? You're going to be disappointed. That's not this book. Yeah. And I love that she did that, because she didn't defend it. She just said, that's not this book. You're going to be disappointed. Too bad.
I'm sure so many people went on like Google, tell me about Elizabeth Gilbert's divorce. I'm like, yeah, I love that. Okay. Was there a second thing I was going to go back to? There was.
the just what I need when I,
Oh, yes.
yes. Yeah. When I would write, like, what do I need today? Yeah.
I love that.
Mhm.
Okay. As we're talking about that, so that one part of the artwork that we talked about, the top above the skeleton
Mhm.
is showing that. But I also love, like, these rays are giving me such divine vibes too. Like,
For sure.
there's a sculpture by Bernini that has these golden rays coming out from Saint Teresa. Have you ever seen that painting? Or not painting, sculpture?
I don't
Hold on.
know.
I'm just going to pull it up. We'll put it in the show notes too, because I just wanted to show you my reference of what I keep thinking of. And this one actually probably would be good for talking about the writing process too, honestly. It's the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, and it was like how, like, captivated she was spiritually. It, like, took over her whole body. And
Yes.
Yeah. By
That's
Bernini.
awesome.
Okay. So just wanted to show you my reference.
Yeah. And I love how the golden rays coming out are not straight lines. They're like squiggly lines. And I love that, because I feel like sometimes the voice, to me, like when I'm seeing that, like the voice kind of, it's not always a straight line, like super straight. It's just like it meanders a little bit. And that's what you see. Like this path is like a little bit of a meandering path, like every single one of them. I love
and
that.
They're not evenly spaced either.
No.
So it's just,
yes.
So one of the other things too that I have learned through working with you is that I thought before I started that writing a book was sitting down and writing a couple hundred words, and then the next day sitting down and writing another couple hundred words, and you just keep doing that until the book is done. I've learned that's not the process at all. Can you talk about that? And if you see that represented in the art anywhere, if you have any ideas on that too.
So it can be like that at times, for sure. Like that's how you get a book written, is you write a little bit every day, like, or, like days.
True. Yeah, there you go.
But there are other pieces to that process that aren't just writing. There's pre-writing, there's thinking, reflecting on what you're writing. There's a lot of marination happening, like, and everybody's different in how they do this. Some people might, jot down notes. Some people might just have this in their head. For me, like, I know that when I'm writing something, I need to build into my process time for thinking about it that isn't even on the page. Like, and for me, those times best are walks. Like, I love pre-writing and walks. So I will think about something, go for a walk, like a long walk, or even like a 20-minute walk, but like go for a walk that is more than 5 minutes and allow myself to just kind of marinate on an idea. And often what I find people mistake for something like writer's block, it's because they haven't given themselves space for the process, or the content isn't ready for them yet in some way. So research can be part of the process. Thinking about it can be part of the process. Doing some other kind of art to help your creative juices can be part of the process. There's lots of things. Reading is part of the process, different genres, even than, like just kind of exploring. All of those pieces are part of the writing process. And yes, coming to the page as consistently as possible, that is what gets a book done. However, it doesn't always look the same, and you have to have space built in for these other pieces of the process. And sometimes it's writing, a new piece. Sometimes it's revising another piece. I always say, when you're at the beginning of the process and you have an outline, you can write anywhere in that outline. So that gives you so much freedom to be able to go and I always say, don't go to the hardest place at the beginning. This is new. Start at the easiest place. And then, like, obviously the further along you get, the less choice you have about where you're going to write. But there are also, those places of revision, because it's not just a one and done thing. It is a very layered process. And you're not going to be cranking it out like just a social media post. That's not how it works.
Yeah. And as I'm looking at this artwork, I can imagine too, I mean, it is her white thing that is kind of what her work of art is very much looks like it's flowing down from her, but I can imagine she can turn it and work on any other part at a time. Cause there's little jagged edges where it's like, oh, I don't know what to do right there. And then there's these little other floating pieces of white that are just off on their own. They're not connected. And those are like the ideas that she's maybe ruminating on that she might come back to and
bring
integrate
it back into the fold. Yeah. Or maybe they'll stay out by themselves for something else. I don't know. I feel like there's so many layers in this piece. That to me is like the hallmark of the writing process, how layered it is and iterative it is. And I see so many layers in here. I think that's another reason why it feels so writerly to me.
Right. Yeah, because I'll write one chapter and then I'll write one and then I'll go write another. And then once I've written the other one, I'm like, well, now I got to rewrite this other one because now I have a different. But
it's not a total rewrite. No, it's just like, I need to put this seed in because it's blooming over here in this chapter, but I have to have the seed if I want it to bloom over here. One of the things that I'm seeing in this that I would love to talk about, because I have an idea about it.
Oh, good.
Is this dark circle down in the bottom left corner.
Oh, yeah.
Right there. And to me, because that's kind of like that's the darkest thing. I mean, it's a little more purpley than her shirt, but to me, from the image that I'm seeing on my screen, it's the only other dark thing besides her in this. And I feel like that's she's, if we're talking about this kind of rust orangey brownish stuff as the interplay with the reader, I feel like she's the anchor there. Her voice is that anchor. She's the anchor. And I was just noticing that, and I mean, probably one of the reasons I think it's an anchor is because this is the bottom of the page too, the bottom of the painting. But that was just standing out to me, and I couldn't resist.
Yeah, it's so funny. The whole time I'm like, oh, it's just a hole punch. But as I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, it's not. It is purple paint or purple. It's purple. It's definitely purple, and it's not perfectly circular. There are some edges that are not. So it's not a hole punch, as I thought it was. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. So she's the anchor in that connection between the work and then the.
Yeah.
It also made me think too. It starts with her work, but then we have the brown, like the birds and kind of bugs flying off, and we have the fish kind of swimming away. That makes me think about, so you write a book, someone reads a book, it sparks an idea in them, then they go make a work of art or write a book about it. And then, it just that influence just keeps rippling out into the world that every work of art, every book is not created as its own singular thing. It has all of these influences of.
Yeah, it's not finite. It is bigger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah. And I don't know if this is related, but it came up, so maybe it is. It makes me think of Glennon Doyle's two books, like how the first one was all about her marriage and stuff. And then the second one, she's like, I got a divorce and I'm gay now. And you're like, wow, two completely different, and she just, the fact that this book was written and then life, and even Elizabeth Gilbert too, is she writes and she falls in love with this guy. And then she writes a book about how her life moves on, and the art is still there, but then the artist is different. And so it's just,
I love that you brought that up, because that's a common thing that happens with a common fear around writing. Well, what if, I put this out there and then I change, I evolve, I have a different way of looking at something. Well, guess what? You will. You're human. I hope we all have a little bit of evolving, things that evolve from us, and your voice evolves over time too. So especially if you're working on a book for a really long time, I mean, and that happens, 5-7 years, something like that, your voice is going to change while you're writing. And so, I mean, when I read the end of Glennon's Love Warrior book, and then like 2 weeks after that came out, like after it was published, she came out. And I was like, wow, that had to be so difficult for her to know during the final stages of publishing, because it was already set. She couldn't change it. It was done. She couldn't
I didn't know the full timeline of how all that happened. Wow.
It was very short. And maybe it wasn't a couple weeks, but it was very shortly after that book came out. And I can imagine how difficult that would have been, knowing, oh, my life. So when you put a book in production with a traditional publisher, it's going to be 6 to 9 months at least before you see that book out in the world. And so she had 6 to 9 months of living between finishing the book and it coming out. A lot happens in 6 to 9 months.
Especially after you've written a book and you've just gone into the depths of your soul and analyzed every facet of your being and rethought your entire existence and put it on the page.
Yeah.
Like, stuff comes up.
So much stuff comes up. Anyone who has nothing coming up, I don't know what they're writing, but like some kind of manual of some kind, maybe.
Maybe. I even think if you're writing a long manual, stuff's going to come up. You're like,
yeah,
why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah. The software's going to change, with the manual.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like that. And then all of that to say, we're talking about how that changes. Then you look at this woman and she's just working, she's just keeping going and keeping focused.
Well, I think that there's a softness to her face, though, even in the focused strength of that.
Yeah.
And I think to me, she looks at peace. Like she looks at peace to me, even though she's doing such concentrated work. And that feels so grounded to me.
Yeah. So that makes me think of your focus on compassion. Can you talk about that and what compassion means to you and why it's such a key part of your work?
Yeah, I feel like compassion is the piece that's often missing when people embark on a writing journey and life journey a lot of times.
Yeah.
But I'm using the definition from Dr. Paul Gilbert, who started the Compassionate Mind Foundation and is the founder of Compassion Focused Therapy and Compassionate Mind Training. And he says compassion is the willingness and the ability to see the pain and suffering in ourselves and others, and then the motivation to try to prevent or alleviate some of that suffering. And when you're writing a book that is just heart-centered and coming from a vulnerable place, which most books are, there's going to be a lot of fear, doubt, uncertainty that comes up. A lot of even past trauma can come up. And we live in a culture and society where it's just kind of productivity is the highest value almost. It seems like sometimes hustle, hustle, hustle. Everything is, just how much can you get done? What can you do? And when that kind of comes together with this artistic endeavor, everything that you write is not going to be in the book. Every time you sit down, you won't put every single thing that you put on the page into the book. It's not like you have a checklist of 60,000 words and you check them off as every day. Okay, I've reached 60. Now it's good to go. There's so much more involved with that. And bringing compassion and compassionate strategies allows for your humanity when it shows up in the process. It allows for a slower process. It allows for your true writer's voice to come out. And when those fears and judgments and difficult emotions and physiological responses happen, if you bring compassion to yourself and to that process, you're able to kind of just float a little bit above that and say oh, this makes sense. This makes sense as to why I'm having this response this way right now. Of course that would happen. Let me breathe a little bit with this. Let me hold that inner child or that part of me that's suffering right now and say, I see you. That was a really difficult time and I'm writing about it right now. And I'm with this process and I'm with you at the moment. And I want to just hold you in this and acknowledge, what we went through. And right now I'm the one in charge though, and I'm going to hold you in this, and we're going to get through this together, recognizing that when these thoughts, feelings, emotions come up, there's nothing wrong with you. It's your humanity showing up. So giving yourself the space for that to happen, not being like, the taskmaster around your writing, but being that gentle holding of space. And that's not saying that you still don't have goals for your book. You do, but you're holding that and giving yourself the grace that you need in order to move through that with support.
Oh, that was so beautiful. I'm like, I just, that was so good. And I can't add anything to it other than beautiful, except for I was looking at the art while you were talking. And I was looking at the purple and the yellow kind of glow around her. And I was just like feeling the warmth of that sort of energy that you're providing for yourself, and the warmth, like that understanding and support and love, and that she is there focused, she is working, but that she's got like all of that, like cocooning her in that creation space.
Yep.
And I love that you mentioned the productivity culture, because I was in your writing practice group since April when we started coaching in, September, I think. I've never once heard you say the words word count.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and I noticed that right away. I was like, oh, okay, we're not updating on how many words we wrote today. But I love that, because, we'll have some people in the group who are like, today I'm not writing, today I'm going to paint, or today I'm going to read, or today, and then and it's such a, I don't know, like a warm, gentle embrace of the whole. Well,
and it's all in service of the book. I think that's what we forget. Like, it doesn't look the same every day. Eventually you're going to be writing most days, but some days you're not writing, but you're still nurturing your book. You're still nurturing that writer's voice. And I think that's the most important thing when you suddenly, and I also think that, the reason that I don't talk about word count as like the optimal thing to go for every day is because every day looks different. It's like anything in life. Mm-hmm. Like when some days you accomplish more than other days. That doesn't mean that those days are less, that you accomplish less. It just means that it didn't come out the same way. But you might have had the most brilliant one sentence in the 150 words you wrote that one day. And maybe the day you wrote 600 words or 1,000 words, you didn't have any like sentences that took you like to the, like you're like, that held you in your heart like that. Those sentences still needed to be there. You can't have every single sentence like that, or else we wouldn't ever finish writing or reading a book. But I think it just, when it's an unfair kind of objective to say like, you're going to write 1,000 words every single day, because that just is not a reasonable expectation, especially for someone first starting out.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we're coming up on an hour, and I want to,
oh my gosh, that was fast.
I know it goes by so fast. I think these could be 2 hours easy. I don't know if the readers or the listeners would that, but I could do it. Before we talk more about your work and how to find you online, is there anything that you see in the painting that you feel, or it's not a painting, I don't know, artwork that is left unsaid? Anything else that you're noticing that you want to bring up?
I think that you kind of just touched on this a second ago, but like with all of these very intricate lines, there's also just this softness with that halo kind of around her of the colors merging and melding together. And I love that it can be both. I love that. And I feel like that is part of the writing process too. It's always a juxtaposition of two things. Like you can have these days that feel sort of crappy, and then you can also have days that feel like effervescent. So I love that there's both in this one piece of art like that, the softness and these hard lines too.
Oh, I love that too. And it made me think too, like at the end, there is this, well, unless it's the book that you just published, Allison's book, that's all colorful. But in many cases, a book is just white page and black words. And it is this like crisp, straight line thing. But that, there's like so much into that, the writing of it.
The process that underpinned all of that wasn't like that. Yeah.
And then what's coming next with the reader and what that book will bring to their lives and how that influences them for the rest of their lives. It's a powerful, powerful thing. Okay. So I know you have your Compassionate Writer course coming up. Do you want to tell listeners about that?
Yeah. So I have a program that I run a couple times a year, usually, called the Compassionate Writer. It's a 6-week program. It's a / program course, and it really delves into why you're writing this book, who you need to be to write this book, who your ideal reader is. And then we move into, what is your book plan and how we can really hone in on that, and what type and like the genre that you're going to be writing in, and key things for whatever genre you are writing in, and how that can. And usually I work mostly in nonfiction, although I have worked with a couple people in fiction, and bringing in compassionate strategies all the way through to really set the foundation for your writing process. Like for the rest of your life, honestly, you can use these skills and strategies over and over and over. So that program is going to start again in February of 2023, the first week of February. I think it's February 7th, but it's a twice a week, 6 weeks. And the setup is, the first session of each week is a teaching and learning, very interactive session. And the second session of the week is a group coaching session. And so you were a part of that. So
yes,
you know what
highly
that
recommend.
looks like. But yeah, and a lot of times people will it's really a kind of a cornerstone foundational piece, and helping you decide, like, do I really want to embark on this writing journey? And how can I then take this and move forward with a plan? Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I did it, and it was
in February.
Yeah, I did the course, highly recommend it. It was a lovely container and really set me up for the work that I'm doing now, and set me up for my work with you as well. So anything, or how can one, anything else you have coming up, and two, how can our readers, I keep saying readers now since we're talking about books, how can our listeners find you online? And we'll link everything too, but
yeah. So my website, Compassionate Mind, cmcollab.com. I am also on Instagram as the Compassionate Writer. And I do work one-on-one with people. So a lot of times people will start with me in that Compassionate Writer program and then move to work one-on-one with me. I also have a writing practice group that is by invitation. So if someone is interested, I would love to have a conversation with them about whether or not they would like to join the writing practice group. And so those are the main ways that I work with people. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, on my website.
Wonderful. Well, if you're at all called listening to write a book, and if you're intrigued by what Heather has to say, I cannot, 10 out of 10, 20 out of 10, 5 stars, 2 thumbs, whatever. It's been a really amazing process for me. So
thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today to talk about this lovely work of art.
This was so much fun. I just have to say, I loved this. It's so much fun.
Thank you so much for listening to Art and Self. And if you loved what you heard, please consider leaving me a rating or a review on iTunes. And share this episode with one friend who you know needs to hear what we talked about today. You will find links to the artworks that we discuss over at the show notes at artandself.com. And you can also join my email list to get notified of all of the new upcoming episodes. The videos of these episodes are also available over on YouTube at Art and Self. And you can also follow me on social media, on Instagram at Art and Self, and on Facebook at Art and Self Cindy. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time.